Hi there, I'm Becca Timmins. I run training, coaching and consultancy business When We Think, working with financial planners. And I'm here today with Brett Davidson, who most of you probably watching this video will know of, who is a consultant and founder of FP Advance, also working in the financial planning space. Welcome, Brett. Thanks very much for agreeing to have a chat with me today.
Thanks, Rebecca. Really looking forward to it.
Good stuff. So coincidentally, recently, Brett and I both gave webinars on PFS Power within a week of each other, which when I watched Brett's back after I'd done my own, there just seemed to be a lot of synergy between what we were talking about. So I invited Brett to have a chat with me about that. And yeah, here we are. So let's start with your webinar and what that was about. So the title of it, Brett, was 10 first meeting mistakes, wasn't it? 10 first meeting mistakes and how to fix them.
Yeah. So this is something I've taught for a long time, and it's I'm going to say it's tongue in cheek, but obviously there's a point behind it. Some of the points are tongue in cheek in the way they're delivered, but it's just to highlight areas where I just notice. I mean, I wrote it, all the things I've done wrong in my life, right, in selling conversations, but I see other advisors now doing it, when I'm working with them. And like the first one, for example, is just talking too much. And the example I often give, there was a very, very good advisor, right, that I worked with, and I worked through these mistakes with him. And the first one, talking too much, he said, Brett, I recorded a session last week and I listened back to the recording, and for the first 30 minutes, my voice is the only voice on the recording. He said, I actually was sitting there thinking, is there a client in the room with me? And he knows better and he's good. And I thought, if you can do that, and we've all done that, then people need to be made aware of this stuff. So that was the reason for the webinar, is just to point out a few of those things. Clearly, there's some more positive stuff one could get onto to fix that, but it's just sometimes good to keep it light and have a laugh at ourselves, I think, because we all do this stuff, right? We're all not perfect.
Yeah, of course. So much of it starts with self-awareness, doesn't it? So I thought we'll get stuck into some of your 10 in a little while, but I thought maybe we'd start at the very beginning, because something, one of your early slides really made me laugh, and you put up a trigger warning about the use of the S word, and kind of warned that you were going to be talking about sales and selling skills in this context. And I just thought we would start there. What made you position it as a trigger warning? Why did you kind of feel that you needed to flag that up front?
Because I hear occasionally, now this is dangerous, because people tell you this secondhand and you assume it's true. I hear anecdotally, right, I'm not seeing this so much in my face-to-face work, but hear anecdotally that some people have a bit of an issue with the selling word. And don't get me wrong, I do too, which is, I'm probably putting that warning there for myself just to get it over with and say, look, we are talking about, if you're a good financial planner, I'm going to call it consultative selling, right? Which means, to my mind, the client is at the center of this. I'm only going to be recommending things that are going to be good for them, right? Like a doctor, or a good doctor, hopefully. But I think there are people out there who just hate the S word. They may have had a bad experience. They might have had really crap, direct sales training that was really like trying to ram people into solutions that weren't right. I went through all that when I started in the industry. I hated it. I never connected with it. I thought, for the first 3 years of my career, I'm thinking, I'm an idiot. I can't do this. I realized later it's just horrific, right? I'm glad I didn't do it, right? I think that puts me in the right camp. So it was just to get that out of the way with people, and call it whatever you want, right? Call it good communication. Let's not get hung up on it, I guess, was what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I think sometimes it can feel like there's a disconnect or something incongruous about the fact that, planners really want to get to know their clients really well and want to, do a really great job and really care about them. But I'm only going to do all of that if you pay me. And that kind of I don't know, that kind of selling bit can be seen as quite separate from the other part of the role, whereas I think the way that you were positioning it was that they're very much interconnected. All of that communication stuff, it is vital to be getting clients over the line, I suppose, and making sure that your conversion rates are good.
Yeah, because what I also see, and this is, I guess this is the reverse, is very, very good people who do care and are only interested in doing the right thing, but the way they're communicating with people isn't getting people to buy. Now I know this sounds like I've ripped it out of a sales book, just forgive me, but if all those things are true, right, that you care and you're good and you're trying to do the right thing, it's sort of a tragedy for the client and for you that there isn't a meeting where you can do some professional work. And let's just call it being a professional. Lawyers don't do work for free either, unless they do it by choice. Accountants and any other professional, engineers, surveyors, they're going to come and talk to you for a bit, and then eventually they're going to say, if you want me to do anything, it's going to cost some money. There's nothing icky about that. But I think that's a journey you have to go on. I say that now. I've probably wrestled with it for the first 20 years of my career, right? I'm now perhaps mostly over that, except on a bad day, right? You can still have a day where you're doubting yourself and you're worried about those things. So I think that's all it was to try and dive into. If any of that's going on for you, I think it's pretty normal, but it's probably something we need to work through. I don't want to stay stuck there.
Mm. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. So this might seem obvious, but from your perspective, I'm just curious what your take is. Why do you think it's so important for planners, whether they're new or experienced, to focus on improving these skills?
Because I think there's, let's start with just the commercial reasons. What I'm seeing, and I've been seeing this and saying this for a long time. I'm now getting even bolder. I'm going to call this the industry's dirty little secret, that even good people, your mates in the industry, can't sell for shit, right? They just they're not very good at it. Okay, and it is the industry's dirty little secret. Now, I went to a conference in the US last year, and Angie Herbis talked about it there, and I'm thinking, this is not just us, okay? It's not because we're from the UK and all Americans can sell stuff. Clearly that's not the case. I think it's just what's happened is, since the demise of the way, my generation got into the industry the horrific way through the life insurance industry, and you got a lot of that training, there's not much of that going on. I've struggled to know where to send people, of late. I love the stuff you're doing, Rebecca, so I'm trying to steer people towards you for some of this training. But the commercial issue is, I'm saying if you're only closing like 25% of the people that you see, that's too low. Now, let me clarify that. Like, you've got to screen out all the people that you should never have been talking to in the first place. That might fix your closing rate. A lot of people don't do that screening well enough. But if you're then in front of people that are sort of genuine on-target people for you, then your closing rate for me should be like 60% or more. And I think a lot of people, are not doing that. So the skills thing, even if you're good at it, I know myself, it took me ages to learn to do it well when I was a younger planner, right? Years and years. And then I got good at it. And then 3 years later, I got lazy and started leaving bits out. It's like cooking my favorite recipe, going, you don't really need the onions. And you leave the onions out and it's not that bad. And then I go, well, you don't really need the garlic, and you leave that out. And all of a sudden, it doesn't taste like it used to taste. Mm-hmm. And I found that was it. I got lazy because I got good at it, and then it didn't work properly. And I had a real, I don't know, I was going to use an expression probably I don't want to say, but I just had a real reckoning with myself, going, man, you need to get back on this. And I see this. Once people who were performing can go off the boil, I think it's a lifelong learning skill. And obviously newer people really, really need to embed themselves in that training, away from the coalface in front of clients for years, right? To really embed that in the way that you work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder, with that lifelong learning as well, you're I guess always going to be the world around you is always going to be moving. So I guess the backdrop against which you're selling your service and trying to get clients to sign up is always shifting. I remember when I think when you were working with me when I was at Emery Little, remember you saying kind of comparing every online experience that you ever had now to Amazon, because Amazon have made it so good. And there's that sort of, that's a backdrop now to which we're, you know, that's the world in which people are selling, where 20 years ago, the backdrop was very, very different.
And also, I think another thing, Rebecca, why this feels like important to me, and why I've spent time on trying to put things together that will help people do this better. I wasn't very good at it. I wasn't a natural salesperson. Like in that old life industry, they're hiring charismatic individuals to go out and convince people to buy stuff that, you know, they probably need but didn't want to buy. Okay, so it was tough, and I wasn't that person. I think there are people out there who do have the gift of the gab and can talk and get people to buy. But if you're not one of those people, then you have to learn what I think is the better way to do it anyway, the skill of asking great questions, leaving lots of space, being comfortable with the silence, and letting the client fill that space for you. And that's the best way to sell anyway, in my view. You know, all you're doing is asking great questions and letting people have the space to tell their story to you or their issues to you. And then you get the full story. When people open up to you like that, there becomes a connection, right? Like a human connection. And then people feel, if you've treated that space with respect, it's very, very easy for people to think, I like this person, I'm going to buy. It's nothing to do with personality or charisma, right? If you don't naturally have that, and I certainly wasn't one of those people.
Yeah, I think there was a phrase that you used. If you say something, the client can question it. If they say it, then it's absolutely the truth. And I think there's so much in that. But I also think there's something about clients feeling like they've got agency. We're not very good. Human beings aren't great with change, but we're so much better with change if we feel like we're the drivers of it. And so I think I completely agree with you that kind of old school, very charismatic, I'm going to tell you what to do, and you know, you're going to sign on the dotted line. It's not actually a very effective way of taking people through a process of change, which financial planning inevitably is. You know, often we're working with clients at the point that they've got big changes coming up in their lives, whether that's, you know, retirement or whatever it might be. So, yeah, I think that's it's a really interesting point. Do you just finally on this, and then maybe we'll move on to one of your top 10. Do you see any difference? Because there's been a big shift in the industry, hasn't there? Well, in the main, away from self-employed advisors and towards employed advisors. And I guess there's less of a, perhaps there's less pressure on most, not all, but less pressure on the employed planners to learn these skills, whereas obviously if you're self-employed, your income depends on getting clients over the line. Do you see anything in that? Because I know you're quite a strong advocate for employing planners. Do you see any kind of any shift around that?
I actually think it's a red herring. One could, I'm sure, you know, people who believe strongly in incentives will make the case that, yeah, being self-employed, your income's on the line and whatever, you've got an incentive to get better. I mean, I meet loads of self-employed advisors who are absolutely hopeless as well, right? With no disrespect, but just saying like, it doesn't make any difference. It's not the issue. The issue is about the skills to be effective. And if you're an employed advisor, then it's on the business to, you know, get you involved in the skills training and the stuff that you're going to need to thrive and prosper as an advisor. And look, I do see resistance sometimes from the advisors, whether they're employed or self-employed, about doing the training. If you were working for me, I wouldn't be having that. Now I'm going to be trying to move you off that position gently and nicely and encouragingly. But eventually, if you're not prepared to do the work to get good, you know, I can't work with you. I don't care how you're employed. Do you know what I mean? I think it's beholden on both parties to make that commitment. The advisor's got to be up for it, and it's challenging, like it's hard to learn those skills, but doable. And the owners of the firms have to be prepared to invest the money and the time to mentor those people internally, but I think also send them out externally for some good quality training.
Yeah, definitely, because it can be hard stuff to teach yourself when I don't know, as a principal of a firm or somebody who's got more experience. A lot of that stuff you've learned through your own experience. So mentoring somebody is one thing and kind of supporting them, but actually training it, I think, is potentially quite hard for somebody who's not taught themselves to train. That you're just kind of trying to pass on your experience, aren't you?
Yeah, it's a really good point, because when I teach the sort of the selling skills day in our Uncover Your Business Potential program, I say that to the owners, like if you're older and bolder, you got the grey hairs and the experience, like you could probably say anything and I'll sit across the table and think, wow, this person really knows their shit. That gives me confidence as the consumer. I'm going, yeah, how do we move forward? Easy, right? But you could do it badly and get away with a lot of stuff. If your 28-year-old advisor does what you do, that will not work, because I'm going to look at that person going, mate, what do you know, right? I'm approaching retirement. You're 28 trying to tell me how this is going to work. That will not work. And so even them sitting in meetings with you and observing you, that's not training if you don't have a process that's robust and skillful that they could use as a 28-year-old or a 35-year-old advisor. Yeah, definitely. So, okay, I think we're probably kind of heading in this direction anyway, and you've mentioned it already, but your number 5 on your first meeting mistakes was fluffing the fee discussion. And I'm really curious to talk about that. I wonder, for me, if it is connected to that kind of it feeling a bit incongruous to, really want to get to know you, and then, but only if you pay me, that sort of idea. What do you see are the main challenges that planners are facing around that area? Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. Just bring me back on track if I wander here. But the first thing, fluffing the fee discussion. If you've designed your first meeting process appropriately, it's going to start with lots and lots of questions, and it's you asking the question, the client doing lots of talking in between those questions from you. So a lot of client work and thinking. There will come a point when we've reached the end of that questioning where we've got a good idea of where the client's at, and we might do a bit of a summary and say, look, have I got this right? This is what I'm hearing from you. I'm going to sum up what the key issues are or what I've taken from the conversation. And are we on the right track here? And the client says, look, yeah, exactly. That's sort of, they've confirmed that you're on the right track. I would just, from there somewhere, I would segue into, let me tell you how it works from here. And now it's my turn to explain the process and how much it's going to cost for each of the steps in the process. And so that feels, if we've done the meeting right, that just feels like a natural transition. Probably by the end, the client's going, mate, just tell me how much it's going to cost, in their head. So we have to deal with that at the appropriate time. And then there'll be some sort of, closing question to say, look, would you like to go ahead and get the initial plan done, or something like that? Be a better question than that. But that's what we're going to be asking. So I think that's the first thing. It should feel natural. If it doesn't, maybe you need to look at the first bit. Okay, and often poor skills up front are the bit that make you then feel really weird about having this fee conversation, but it shouldn't feel like that if we've done the right thing. The other point I often make with the fee discussion, now I know some firms do this and they're okay with it, but I would just tell the clients the fees at the end of my first meeting. This is how it works. Let me tell you how it works from here, and explain the steps and the costs, and then ask the client, did they want to move forward? A lot of places, well, not a lot of places, some firms tell me they don't do that. They say to the client, listen, I'll draft you a scoping letter and I'll send it out and tell you how much it's going to cost. Now, I just don't love that approach. It does work for some firms. So again, if it's working for you, keep doing it. But it just, to me, adds another step that doesn't need to exist. I think the reason people default to the letter is they're too scared to have the conversation with the client. Okay, I believe that for 90% of those people. Maybe there is some going, Brett, that's not why we do it. I hear you, that's cool. but just, I think that's the wrong reason, right? Get the meeting structure right, learn the questioning skills. By that point, the client should be really engaged, and I mean figuratively, eating out of the palm of your hand in terms of trusting you and thinking, wow, this is a beautiful experience. I never expected it to be like this. And then when you tell them how much it cost, brilliant. And if it's a little bit more than they expected, which it always is, even better, because they can sit there. I do this all the time. I'm going, oh, gee, that's a bit more than I was looking to pay, but wow, how good is it? And that's a beautiful decision to have to make, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is, I think there's an assumption in all of that people have designed their first meeting process. I don't think, where I'm coming across, I don't think most people have. I love your list of interesting questions that you talk about, and partly because, you know, whether the questions are quite right for everybody, or you might change them around to suit your own words. I really like the fact that it's built around a process of sort of taking I say it sounds so cheesy, but taking a client on a journey through that first meeting, which I don't think many people have designed that. I don't think many people think like that about their initial meetings with clients.
And this is just worth saying, because I think you're right. Like I've said in blogs and in talks, the only bit that is art in what we do is that first meeting. And if you haven't designed it, thought about it, you know, tried it, tweaked it, and got it absolutely down pat, like it's the only skill that's really hard to master. But you got to do that work. And I'm gobsmacked when I see what you see, and I see it all the time, where you think, mate, you haven't even thought about this. You've never sat away from the coalface. You can't do this practicing on clients. You have to do it away from the coalface and figure out what's the order that I'm going to do this in. You can still be flexible. You can still be listening. That takes time. At first, when you do it, you can't listen and think at the same time, but that will come. That passes quickly. But yeah, I just can't believe people haven't done some work on that. A little bit of work on it could change your life as a financial planner, could change the trajectory of your career, your earnings, your job satisfaction. I just can't stress that enough.
Yeah, and to be honest, that's why when I've built the Unlocking Excellence program, I've done it as I mean, it's optional, but to do it as a qualification program, so that there's like a 6-month period, 6 to 9 months, when people are pairing up on the course and taking each other through their first meeting process and really practicing that with each other. Because you're right, you can't practice this stuff with clients. You've got to take it away and really think it through. What's going to work for you, making sure that there's a structure, yes, and it's in your style, and you've got your way of asking questions that feels authentic, I suppose, for you. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. So I work a lot, when I'm working with clients, I work with assumptions, and we look for untrue limiting assumptions that people might be holding that are holding them back. And again, when I'm working with financial planners, we look at how to weave that into work with clients. But I wonder, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. I wonder what planners might be assuming that stops them being clear and concise about their fees and causes them to fluff that fee discussion. Is that something that you...
Yeah, I think the absolute root cause of it is not quite being 100% convinced yourself that you're really good value for what you do. Now, I've heard so much unhelpful advice on this, like people, bolshy types, tell you need to just be confident or this or that. What a load of nonsense, right? If I was confident, I wouldn't have any problem explaining the damn fee, right? So I always use the example, if someone rings me up tomorrow and says, Brett, let's come and run the marathon next week, I have to say, no, I haven't run for 5 years. I've done no training. And they go, Brett, just be confident. No, dude, my knees will be broken by kilometer 10, right? It's just not going to work. If I'm going to do that, I've got to do the miles, I've got to do the training, I've got to do the work. And if I do that for probably a year or a year and a half, maybe 2 years in my case, maybe I can be on the line, still nervous, but despite the nerves, an inner confidence thinking, I've done the work, right? I don't know if I'm going to hit my time, but I know I'm going to go okay, right? I've done the work. I'm feeling good. And I think it's the same with this. You've got to do the work away from the meeting room with clients, okay, to be able to go in and have some confidence that you can take the client on that journey skillfully, get them engaged. And I think doing the work is the easy bit. But again, I mean, I'll give you another example. There's another tool we teach called the value-added checklist, where at review time, we're asking advisors to go through and think, where did I add value to the client in cash? Now, I get a lot of pushback on this, all right? I remember doing some work with Emery Little. There was a little bit of pushback on this because good advisors who are like into life planning, financial planning, and skillful are going, mate, that is not the value we add, right? And I get it. It's not. The value we add is the peace of mind and letting people really, really live their lives free of worry and stuff like that. But doing the value-added checklist is a great exercise for advisors to do to see how much value in cash they add, like tax wins, pension wins, investment cost savings, you name it. It just is off the scale. And once you've done that with a bunch of your client files, you'll recognize that if I charge a premium price, I'm still amazing value, right? If I'm a proper financial planner. And I think it's these sort of things you've got to work through and do. And it still takes years. You can still see it 20 times and go, I still don't quite believe it, but it's moving you along that curve. And I think when you can't explain the fee thing with a level of confidence, it doesn't mean you still won't be nervous. I still get nervous pitching my fees to people after all this time. Yep. But you can still have that inner confidence thinking, no, I know this is good value. And that's what I think the work away from the coalface gives you.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think I've definitely witnessed quite a lot of resistance to that value-added checklist. And I guess what I see is that all of the intangible value that financial planners absolutely add, and that, the peace of mind of working with financial planning firms and all of that, it sits on top actually. And so if you can really think about the pounds and pence savings, or that you've saved the client, and then think about all the intangibles on top, then maybe that is a big confidence builder. But I do wonder. So I'm now this year, the last few years, sort of doing my own thing, and this year particularly, as I've really stepped it up, I'm having to do this for the first time. I'm having to kind of have these sorts of fee discussions. And one of the things that really grounds me in that is a lot of this work. So my coaching rates, for example, I've had coaching myself, and I know the value of it. I know the value for myself. This might be wrong, but I don't know of many financial planners that are paying a financial planner themselves.
I know none. So, right. And I always ask that question. And again, just for a laugh, say shame on you all, right, for doing that. But I've encouraged people to go and do that for a bunch of reasons. One, doctors are not allowed to give advice to their own family. There's a reason for that. And they're not allowed to medicate themselves. There's a reason for that. And financial planners should be exactly the same. There's no way you should be doing your own financial planning with all the love in the world. But the other benefit, besides just that it's probably good practice, go and spend some of your own hard-earned, and you will feel what it feels like to be a client. I got to be honest, when I'm cutting the check for a couple of grand to my advisor for the advice, it hurts a little bit. I'm going, please God, let this be valuable, right? Because that's how vulnerable you are when you're in that situation. You need to experience that as an advisor, because you've never experienced that, maybe in other areas, but not in financial planning. But also, let's say it costs you a couple of grand to get advice. Whether you go ahead with that advice or you end up doing it yourself is fine. I'm not saying you have to necessarily go all the way with that, but that $2,000 or whatever it costs you to get the advice will be the best market research you've ever done. Now, you don't have to go back and tell the advisor all the things you hated about their process, but you can experience that and go, oh yeah, that's no good. We do that. I'm going to, it's just the cheapest market research you could do. Right? How else are you going to find out that information? I reckon a few grand is a bargain for that, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Okay. Well, let's move on then. I guess your top 10 numbers 7, 8, and 9. Don't worry, I'll remind you what they are in a minute. 7, 8, and 9 probably most closely linked to the work that I do, and we've touched on some of it already. But 7 is not asking, searching, and interesting questions. 8 is not listening to the answers. And then 9 is not recognizing the significance of the answers. So I think they kind of sit really nicely together. And I wondered if we can talk a little bit about that. What do you think is happening most often then? What do you see as the kind of the challenges? Why are they on your list?
Yeah, so I guess the first one, number 7, is probably the most common because no one's really thought about their process. They haven't got a list of interesting questions to work from, or they're too embarrassed to put it on the table. I always tell this in my training. I'm going to have that list smack on the table in front of me and the client. The heading at the top is going to be in the biggest font ever in the history of the universe, and it's going to say my list of interesting questions. And if the client looks over and goes, "What's that?" I'm just going to laugh and go, "Mate, it's my list of interesting questions." And then I'm just going to get into it. And by the end, the client's going to be laughing too, going, "Mate, these questions are great." And now we've got a connection. I'm not going to try and memorize them. I can't do that. So that's the first thing. So I think the first mistake is people are not even doing that. But when they do, I've done role plays. Now, again, probably in a role play where this is a new skill, this is exactly what you would expect to happen. But because they're so focused on asking the question, they're not really listening to what's coming back. That happens the first few times, but it passes very quickly. That's just because you're doing something new, your brain's full of the new. That will pass after 3 or 4 goes at that. But you've got to be listening. And then the third one that ties into that, I've heard when clients explain what's important to them, it can be subtle and soft, but very important. And I think I used the example, Julie Lord told me this years ago, that she'd met a lawyer in London who, this is the short version, but when she was talking about what did he want to do with his life, she asked him these cool questions. He sort of mentioned that he'd quite like to move to the coast and write a book. But he didn't stand on the table shaking his fist going, "I must do this before I die." It was just something that came up in the conversation. And so she was a great advisor. She picks up on that and said, "So what's stopping you?" Like, this is the short version of their conversation. "What's stopping you?" And he's saying, "Well, I can't." And she's going like, "Why not?" And that was her basically saying, "Look, I can show you in a cash flow model that you could do this tomorrow. So now what's stopping you?" And that's the nuance and subtlety of listening to that. If a lot of advisors would hear the lawyer mention that as a thing, not give it the attention it needed to unpick, and perhaps would have let them work another 5 years in their crappy law career. So that's that sort of stuff. What people want to do can be soft and subtle, which is why your work, where we're really listening to people, I just think is so important.
And you're right that it really does take practice to get out of your own head. And that's so much like it's all of day one really of most of the programs that I run. It's about listening to listen. You're not listening to reply. You're not listening to form your own next amazing, interesting question. You're listening to really listen and trust yourself that actually, if you do that, when the other person's finished, you'll come up with the next thing to say because you've been listening, because you remain curious, because you're deeply interested in the human being that's in front of you, which, let's face it, that's the reason most people are doing a financial planning job, because they're interested in people and they want to help.
Yeah, and every financial planner I know tells me, it doesn't matter how long they've been doing it, that they love that. That's the thrill of the job, is being able to change people's lives in some way. Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's little, sometimes it's in between, but that's the job, isn't it, when this is done well. And clients, I think, are so appreciative because I don't believe they get this. Like, their chances of picking one of the advisors we know and love, that the proper financial planning cohort, the chances of picking that randomly out of the phone book are slim. Yeah. And so when they do trip over or they get referred by a friend or whatever, I just think people love it. And that's the thrill for the advisor. to have that experience where you can see people are really into what you're providing. That's just still the thrill of the job for me after all these years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you're not listening really well, you can miss so much. I think, whether it's dreams and aspirations, or whether it's actually vulnerabilities as well. That's a pretty hot topic, isn't it? I've definitely seen that happen when I remember I was told a story, actually. I think it might have been on one of my recent courses, and it was an observation made by one of the planners about somebody else that they'd kind of seen in action. A client had started opening up about, I can't remember what the situation was. It's something like having I think it was an adult son maybe back at home and unable to work, and was really struggling, and actually the way that it was dealt with was okay, back to the cash flow. So there was a real lack of comfort with emotion that was being shown, or whether it was missing what was said, or whether it was being uncomfortable and not really wanting to open up a big emotional can of worms in a financial planning meeting, or whatever it was. But that was huge to that client, and something that really was it really did impact their financial planning. And so this was the observation that was being made, like that should have been picked up on and given more space.
Yeah, and like you think about it, like therapists probably have to go and do 5 years of therapy before they're allowed to practice. Coaches have to go and do their own coaching and be the recipient before they're allowed to go and coach. And there's a reason for that. This all starts with you. You got to work on yourself, and it doesn't matter what role you're in. That's the starting point. But yes, if you're going to be let rip on the general public, man, you're going to have to do some work on yourself so that those things don't happen. And don't get me wrong, we've probably all done that in our career. Like these are mistakes we make. But we want to recognize that after maybe an hour after the meeting, you think, oh, gee whiz, I could have handled that differently. Great. There's a work on. There's something to go and dive into to make yourself better for next time.
Yeah, definitely. Something that my coach does that's been a takeaway for me. When she works with me or any of her clients, she has 2 columns on her notepad, and she'll make any notes on the left-hand side that's about me or what I say. And anything that comes up for her, she'll note on the right-hand side, so that she's aware of that and can take it away, or, that was a bit reactive of me, or, I didn't want to hear that. So whatever it might be. And obviously she's been doing the job a long time and she's very, very self-aware. But I think you're right, that kind of work is so important, whether it's that kind of getting comfortable with emotions and doing that sort of work, or actually just getting comfortable with silence, because most of us aren't. That's why we jump into a conversation. It's because we can't bear the silence. It's not because the other person's probably doing some really deep, great thinking while they're staring out the window. Let's leave them to it, let them get on with it.
And Rebecca, I have a question for you. Like in the programs you've run this year, like what are you seeing? And I know you've done lots of work with different firms. What are you seeing? Like when you work in this space, working on the skills of advisors, what's the big stuff for you that you notice?
Well, I mean, it's big stuff, but it's the simple stuff. It's not easy, but it's relatively simple. Getting comfortable with silence, not jumping into that pause, because where there's a pause in the conversation, that's where we're used to jumping in and getting our turn. Learning to listen without having that expected need to reply, being comfortable asking, well, what more do you want to say about that? And really getting the other person to dig in. And I think the other big thing is realizing that the client is the best person to solve. They're the expert on them, and actually they're probably the best person to solve some of these issues for themselves. You're the expert on the financial product, solutions, whatever it is that's going to financially enable them to live the life that they want to live, but you're with them for maybe 2 hours in their whole year. There's so much else that's going on. So I think that positioning the client as the expert on them, and you're the expert on the financial side of things, and that's why they've come to see you. But that really realizing that and not jumping in too soon to fix a problem that might seem to be what's presenting itself, or you might have seen that with 10 other clients in the past. Let's not assume that that's the case with this person. Let's not assume that that's going to be That's going to be the solution here. I was absolutely delighted to welcome Ruth Sturkey onto one of my recent courses, and she, you might have seen her blog, but in her most recent blog she wrote about her experience, and she said something like, when she was listening in this way that I teach, I could see the humanity, intelligence and emotions of the person in front of me. And I mean, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing. And we're not doing it. We're not listening long enough to really see that. And I think that the big win for me there is empathy. You're developing such a deep empathy for the other person's situation. And where very often we're training perhaps younger financial planners to work with older clients. Their lives don't look the same. How do we display empathy when we don't look like the people we're working with? And actually, perhaps people who are more experienced are now having to develop a proposition that works for younger clients and needing to work with people again who don't look so much like them. If we can listen for longer and really be comfortable with whatever we're hearing, not express judgment, allow people to really feel heard, we're expressing empathy, we're building connection, which means that people are going to be more likely to want to work with us. So yeah, it's a long answer to a short question, but all of that it's the simple stuff that is mind-blowing when you get it right and you see the impact that it can have.
Yeah, and I was thinking, and I think Ruth has expressed it so much better than I was going to express it, but I was just thinking to myself, when I've taken the time to keep going and just push a little bit further than I might feel comfortable with questions with clients, people are so interesting. Like, you find out stuff, the hobbies and things they're into, you're looking at the person going, I never would have guessed. And that's so fascinating. So if you can go there, it just becomes even more rich. Your job becomes so much more interesting because you just find out so much more about people. It's super cool.
Yeah, definitely. So I just thought we'd pick on one more of your top 10. And this was, it made me laugh, it's number 3, going for the jugular. And I love your term, vampire advisor. I wonder if I have to now pay you because I've just said that out loud.
You do. Send me a quid. There you go.
Okay, just a quid. It's all right, it's worth it. But yeah, I just wondered if you could explain a bit about what you meant by that term.
Yeah, so this is clearly very tongue-in-cheek, okay?
Yeah.
But I just remember when I was teaching this years and years ago, this is where I came up with the idea. I did a role play, and I gave people the list of interesting questions, and the instruction was just to go through these questions, right? You would think reasonably straightforward. I know it's not like that when you're doing the exercise sometimes. But anyway, someone asked a question. I think we're 2 questions in. The role play advisor mentioned the word pension. And for the next 20 minutes, this advisor started talking all that they knew about pensions and how they could do this and do that and whatever. And that's what I mean by going for the jugular. They obviously got excited that they knew a solution to this person's particular issue. But yeah, the correct strategy would have been to make a note for later and then just ask the next question and let the client keep going with that explanation. But they dived straight in. Now, inexperienced advisors, and again, I've done this a million times myself, that's what we do. We hear one thing, boom, we latch onto it. That's what I mean by the vampire advisor, going straight for the jugular. Yeah, I know about that. Let me tell you all about that. That's not going to make a sale. And again, if you record your meetings, and this is the one top tip I'll give anyone who's listening today, just record your own meetings on your phone. I get permission from the client, they'll be fine. Go and listen to the recordings afterwards. Mate, it's hard listening to yourself, but you'll only listen to 3 of those and you'll probably improve like 180% because you'll just knock out all those things that you can hear in the recording that you just perhaps don't notice when you're in the meeting in the heat of battle.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that come to my mind when you're talking there, actually. One, and again, something that we talk about quite a lot on the programs that I run, particularly the coaching-based programs, is how, when we start off in conversation with somebody, we generally start off fairly surface. Brits are very good at talking about the weather. I don't know where Aussies start, but maybe it's very similar. Although it's mostly sunny, I guess, where you come from, so maybe not so much. But anyway, we'll start on the surface, and gradually, as we listen to, we tend to go deeper and deeper towards the stuff that's really important to us. And I think something like that becomes an interruption. oh, I've just latched onto pensions being something, right, I'm going to now throw 20 minutes of information at you about pensions, and the client gets brought back up to the surface, and you're probably starting again in terms of getting them closer to what's really important to them, and disclosing that and feeling safe to tell you all of that, you know, that good, useful, helpful stuff when it comes to building a financial plan, actually. So I think really not interrupting people's thinking, I think it's a great tip. Just make a note of it and come back to it later. You don't ignore it, but, you know, you come back to it later. So yeah, I think that
Can I add
really
to that?
resonates. Yeah, of course.
If I start to answer a question, and then you, as the advisor, in any scenario I can think of, and I've experienced this, and then they start like telling me stuff they know. Lawyers can do that. Bad lawyers can do this, you know, or whatever. It's not bad. I'm sitting there fuming, going, mate, shut up. This is not your meeting. I'm paying for the time here. You know, I'll be furious at that, because I also know I'm in the hands of an amateur, and I'm just thinking, mate, how fast can I get out of this room? It's the death knell for a meeting. It's really something that you want to, if you catch yourself doing it, like I said, I've done it a million times, so I'm not throwing stones at everyone else. But yeah, you want to get that one out of your repertoire, because it's a passion killer. There's no question.
Yeah, definitely. And I wonder if, I mean, it's partly an experience, and I wonder if it's also a bit of a, like, we're all wanting to help, I guess. Like, that's where a lot of it's coming from. And, oh, this is the way that I can help. I can add some value by, and going into that fixing mode very quickly can be a result of that. But I think, again, there's all sorts of assumptions going on there. Like, I'm the right person to fix this. I know what problem it is that I need to fix. And, you know, I just think giving more and more time and space to clients, because it might not be pensions. It probably isn't pensions, really, that's their actual issue, or that they actually really want to work on. And giving more space and asking more questions, you're going to get much closer to the stuff that's really important to people. You know, maybe pensions is part of the solution, but it's probably not, you know, 10 minutes into a meeting.
No, that's it. And this is the thing, right? If you know that not enough people are buying from you, it's all these pretty obvious things, those top 10 mistakes. If you could just knock most of those out, again, you're gonna improve your outcomes by a factor of, you know, goodness knows what. It's just, they're so easy to fix, really. You just got to get your head screwed on, do a bit of practice. But yeah, it'll make a massive difference to the outcomes you're getting in front of the client.
Cool. Well, let's start to come to a close then, if that's all right. I wonder if you were going to pick out, Brett, your number one mistake, or maybe we've just covered it, but the number one mistake, the thing that you would ask everybody to rectify, to work on, or work on rectifying, to, you know, increase their conversion rates, deliver a better service, you know, really up their game, what would that be? What would be your number one?
It's the one that's number one on my list. It's talking too much. Yeah, and that ties into asking good questions, obviously. But if you just asked bad questions and that's all you did, and didn't talk too much, again, you probably double your closing rate just by doing that. Yeah, if you can put some good questions in there and listen and whatever, you know, you can transform the experience for you and the client, and your then commercial and financial performance, which gives that gives you confidence too. When more people start to buy, that really helps you feel good about, hey, I must be doing something cool here. And clients are telling you, I loved it. I love the experience. I love what you've done for us. Thank you so much. You know, that's what you're looking for, I guess, to build that confidence. So that'd be the number one. Talk less, ask questions more.
Fantastic. So is there anything that you wish I'd asked you? Anything else that we haven't covered that you wish I'd asked you?
Such a great question, and no.
Okay. Fantastic. So thank you so much for taking the time to have a conversation today, Brett. I so appreciate your passion for what you do and passion for financial planning and the impact that financial planners can really have on their clients' lives. So yeah, thank you very much for taking the time.
Yeah, how could you not love it? It's such a great profession. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Thanks a lot. Take care.